"That is my house." Daniel Mercer said it quietly, almost to himself, because for several seconds his mind refused to accept what his eyes were telling him. He had been gone 12 days. Now he sat behind the wheel of his pickup at the end of the gravel driveway, staring at an empty patch of sky where his lake house had stood for nearly 40 years. He shut off the engine and stepped out. The house was gone. A scraped concrete foundation sat between piles of lumber, roofing, insulation, and broken sections of the old stone fireplace his father had built by hand. Heavy equipment tracks crossed the yard. A yellow excavator stood near the shoreline, and a contractor trailer was parked beside the trees. Daniel reached for his phone. He took pictures of the excavator, the trailer, the tire tracks, the foundation, and the utility connections. Then he heard tires behind him. A white sport utility vehicle came up the driveway and stopped. Patricia Caldwell stepped out carrying a folder. "Daniel." "Patricia." She glanced at the foundation. "I was hoping someone from management would reach you before you got back." Daniel looked at her. "Reach me about what?" Patricia opened the folder. The structure was determined to be unsafe. The board had to act. Daniel took the papers, but kept his eyes on her. "You demolished my house. An emergency removal was authorized." "By who?" "Briarwood Shores." Daniel looked down at the first page. "I am not in Briarwood Shores." Patricia exhaled. "We have been through this." "Yes, we have." He turned another page. "That is why I am asking." Her voice hardened. "The property created a shoreline safety issue. We could not leave it unresolved simply because you were unavailable." Daniel stopped turning pages. "I was in Tennessee, Patricia. My phone worked." She did not answer that. Instead, she pointed to the final sheet. "There are costs associated with the removal. You will need to speak with management about those." Daniel read the amount, then looked past her at the empty foundation. "You tore down my house, and you sent me the bill." The association followed the information it had. "What information?" "Daniel, I am not going to argue with you in the driveway." "Good." He folded the papers and put them in his truck. Patricia seemed caught off guard by that. "You should seriously consider the purchase offer now," she said. "The parcel is cleared. There is no reason this has to become more difficult." Daniel turned back toward her. "The purchase offer, $1,800,000, is still a substantial amount of money." He studied her face for a moment. "You came here to talk about buying my land on the same day I came home and found my house gone." Patricia tightened her grip on the folder. "I came here because somebody needed to explain what happened." "Then explain it." She had nothing more to say. Daniel walked away from her and began photographing the property again. Near the foundation, he noticed something that did not fit Patricia's story. The excavator tracks continued past the house. They cut through the yard in a straight line toward Lake Briarwood. Daniel followed them. Nearly 60 feet beyond the foundation had been cleared. Small trees had been removed. Brush had been pushed aside. The disturbed ground formed a broad corridor all the way to the water. Patricia called from behind him. The crew needed equipment access. Daniel looked back toward the driveway. They came in from there. Patricia said nothing. He turned toward the opposite ridge, where the roofs of Briarwood Shores were visible through the trees. The cleared strip connected the edge of the development to the lake almost perfectly. Daniel felt the question change in his mind. It was no longer only why they had demolished his house. It was why they had cleared everything behind it. He walked back toward his truck, then stopped beside an old pine. About 18 feet above the ground, hidden behind a branch, sat a small weatherproof camera housing. Years earlier, Daniel had installed it after equipment disappeared from a storage shed. The newer cameras closer to the house had been moved during the demolition. This one had not. Patricia followed his gaze, but apparently saw nothing. "My advice," she said, "is to let the attorneys handle this." Daniel opened his truck door. "For once, we agree." She drove away 5 minutes later. Daniel waited until her white sport utility vehicle disappeared around the bend. Then he opened his laptop and signed into the remote camera archive. 12 days of recordings were still there. He found the morning the contractor arrived and moved the cursor to the first clip. At 7:43, 3 work trucks entered his driveway. At 7:46, another vehicle appeared behind them. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. It was Patricia's white sport utility vehicle. She stepped out carrying a rolled set of plans. Daniel watched her walk directly toward the contractor before anyone had inspected his house, before any emergency had supposedly been discovered, and before the first machine had moved. He picked up Patricia's paperwork and checked the time printed beside the structural assessment. 9:35 that morning. Daniel looked back at the video. 7:46. He reached for his phone and called Rebecca Sloan. She answered on the fourth ring. Rebecca, it is Daniel. You sound strange. What happened? Daniel kept his eyes on Patricia frozen on the laptop screen, plans tucked under her arm. I need a property attorney. There was a short silence. How bad is it? Daniel looked through the windshield at the empty foundation. They took the house down. Another silence. Then Rebecca's voice changed completely. Do not touch anything. Do not send anyone a message. Take pictures of everything you can see. Daniel looked at the camera archive. I think I have more than pictures. What do you have? He pressed play. I am about to find out. Rebecca arrived at Lake Briarwood just after 8 the next morning. She parked beside Daniel's truck, stepped out with a leather case in one hand, and stopped when she saw the foundation. You were not exaggerating. Daniel handed her a coffee. I wish I had been. She walked to the edge of the debris but did not step onto it. Who has been here since you got back? Patricia. Me. Nobody else that I know of. Keep it that way for now. They went inside Daniel's detached workshop, one of the few structures the crew had left untouched. Daniel opened his laptop and brought up the camera archive. Rebecca pulled out a legal pad. Before we watch anything, start at the beginning. Why does this homeowners association think it has authority over you? It does not. I know what you think. Tell me what you can prove. Daniel looked at her. You always this pleasant before breakfast? Only when somebody calls me because their house disappeared. That got the first small laugh out of him since he came home. Daniel opened a scanned copy of his deed. My father bought this parcel in 1986. He built the house the following year. Briarwood Shores did not exist here yet. And when the development came in, our parcel was never included. No declaration, no membership agreement, no annexation. Rebecca nodded. Good. Keep going. Daniel pulled up the county plat. His property covered just under 4 acres along the western shore of Lake Briarwood. Briarwood Shores wrapped around part of the eastern boundary, but stopped short of Daniel's land. For years, that line had meant almost nothing. Then Patricia Caldwell became association president. 6 months earlier, she had appeared at Daniel's front door with a real estate consultant named Mark Ellison and a glossy folder. Daniel still remembered the conversation because Patricia had opened with the price before explaining what she wanted. $1,800,000, she had said. Daniel looked from her to Mark. For the house. For the entire parcel. Why? Patricia smiled. Briarwood Shores is improving its waterfront amenities. Your property would allow us to make the shoreline more useful for the whole community. Daniel flipped through the presentation. There were drawings of walking paths, a pavilion, landscape terraces, and docks extending into the lake. One section of the plan was covered by a large decorative label reading Briarwood Waterfront Vision. Daniel tapped the page. What is under this? Mark glanced at Patricia before answering. Conceptual access planning. That sounds expensive. Patricia gave a short laugh. It is ambitious. Daniel closed the folder. I am not selling. Patricia's smile remained, but something behind it changed. You should take some time. I have. You have had the offer for about 4 minutes. The answer was no before you arrived. Patricia looked past him toward the lake. Your father turned down offers too, did he not? Daniel had never told her that. How do you know what my father did? Mark shifted his weight. Patricia simply said, property history is part of due diligence. She left the offer on Daniel's table. 2 weeks later, the first violation notice arrived. The association claimed his dock failed community appearance standards. Daniel sent it back with a copy of the county plat. Then came a notice about shoreline vegetation. Then a demand to inspect the house. Each time Daniel gave the same answer. I am not a member of your association. Patricia eventually came to the property herself. You are making this unnecessarily difficult, she told him. For who? For everyone. You want my land. I do not want to sell it. That seems pretty simple. Patricia pointed toward the water. This shoreline affects more than one property owner. Then manage the shoreline you own. She stared at him for a second, then walked back to her vehicle. Rebecca stopped writing. Did you save those notices? Daniel pointed toward a metal cabinet. Everyone. Your father trained you well. He kept receipts for nails he bought in 1992. Daniel opened the cabinet and removed a fireproof document box. Beneath the deed and tax records was an older survey Robert Mercer had kept folded inside a protective sleeve. A narrow notation followed the eastern side of the parcel toward the lake. Rebecca leaned closer. What is that? I never paid much attention to it. Your father did. Daniel nodded. Years earlier, Robert had rejected another developer who wanted access across the property. Daniel had asked why he would not take the money. His father's answer had been short. Never sign away the shoreline rights. At the time, Daniel thought it was simply Robert being protective of the lake. Rebecca studied the notation. I want the recording tied to this instrument. You think it matters? I think Patricia offered you $1,800,000 before she started, pretending she could regulate your dock. That makes me curious. Daniel turned back to the laptop. There is something else. He opened a photograph taken 3 weeks before his Tennessee trip. 2 workers stood beside red survey stakes near the eastern boundary. A measuring line ran from Briarwood Shores toward Daniel's house and continued toward the water. Rebecca compared the photograph with the old survey. Where does that line end? Daniel pointed through the workshop window toward the newly cleared ground, right where their excavator stopped. Rebecca looked outside for several seconds. All right, she said. Now show me the video. Daniel started the recording at 7:43. 3 contractor trucks came through the driveway first, followed by a flatbed carrying equipment. At 7:46, Patricia's white sport utility vehicle appeared behind them. Rebecca leaned closer to the laptop. Pause it. Daniel did. Patricia was halfway out of the vehicle with a rolled set of plans under her arm. What time does her notice say the structural assessment happened? Rebecca asked. 9:35. And she is here almost 2 hours earlier with a demolition crew. Looks that way. Do not say looks that way. We know when she arrived. We do not know what she told them yet. Daniel glanced at her. You really do take the fun out of this. That is why you called me. He pressed play. Patricia crossed the driveway and met a man beside the contractor trailer. They spread the plans across the hood of a truck. She pointed toward the house, then toward the shoreline. 2 workers began placing markers through the yard. At 8:12, the excavator moved into position. Rebecca wrote down the time. Who is the contractor? Keen Site Services. Know them? No. I will. The footage continued. At 9:17, work began on the house. Daniel stopped the video himself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Watching the empty foundation outside had been one thing. Watching the house still standing on the screen was different. Rebecca noticed his hand resting motionless on the mouse. We can stop. No. Daniel. Keep going. At 9:35, nothing happened that resembled an inspection. No engineer arrived. No county vehicle appeared. No one walked around the structure taking measurements or photographs. The crew kept working. 7 minutes later, Patricia returned to the truck hood with the plans. She spoke to the site's supervisor, pointed past the house, and traced a line toward the lake with her hand. Rebecca tapped the table. There. Daniel paused it. The corridor. Maybe. We prove that later. She looked at him. Now I need every letter Patricia ever sent you. Daniel brought out the fireproof box. They spent the next hour arranging notices by date. The first complained about his dock. The second cited shoreline vegetation. The third demanded an inspection. Then came fines for refusing access. Every notice referred to a different source of supposed authority. Rebecca placed them in a row. Did they ever send you the declaration that supposedly binds your property? I asked 3 times. And nothing. Daniel found his certified letters. Rebecca read one and nodded. This helps. Why? Because you did not ignore them. You told them exactly why you disputed their authority. Daniel pulled another document from the box. Then Patricia sent this. It was a survey commissioned by Briarwood Shores. Rebecca laid it beside the certified county plat. The association version pushed a boundary line toward Daniel's house and labeled part of the parcel a shared shoreline management area. Who prepared this? A private survey firm. Did the county record a boundary change? No. I checked. Daniel told her about calling Susan Hale at the county records office. Susan had confirmed there was no annexation, transfer, or amendment affecting his parcel. Daniel had ordered certified copies and taken them to a Briarwood Shores meeting. Patricia had been standing at the front of the room when he placed both maps on the table. Show me the recorded document that moved this line, Daniel had said. Patricia barely looked at the county plat. The association has broader shoreline responsibilities than you seem to understand. That is not what I asked. We are not turning this meeting into a private property dispute. Elaine Porter, a board member Daniel barely knew, leaned forward. Patricia, has counsel reviewed his deed? Patricia's eyes moved toward her. It is being handled. That is a yes or no question, Elaine said. Patricia ended the discussion and moved to the next agenda item. 3 days later, Daniel found red survey stakes beside his driveway. A crew was measuring a route toward the lake. He walked over to the supervisor. Who hired you? Briarwood Shores. For what? The man checked his clipboard. Waterfront access planning. Before Daniel could ask anything else, Patricia's vehicle pulled up. She got out quickly. There has been a misunderstanding. Daniel looked at the measuring line running across his property. Whose misunderstanding? Patricia turned to the crew. Pack it up. Patricia, Daniel said, what are you planning? She shut the rear door of the survey truck herself. You had an opportunity to make this easy. By selling you my house. By cooperating. Those are not the same thing. She looked at him for a long moment. The board will resolve it. That afternoon, Daniel installed 2 additional cameras and changed the system so every recording uploaded automatically to remote storage. Back in the workshop, Rebecca looked from the survey photograph to the demolition footage. When were you scheduled to leave for Tennessee? 3 days after that conversation. Did Patricia know? Daniel thought about it. I mentioned it at the meeting. I told them any future inspection request would have to wait until I got back. Rebecca closed the folder. Then we stopped guessing. She took out her phone. I want the county records, the survey firm's file, and whatever Keysight services was given before they came onto your land. Daniel looked at Patricia frozen on the screen. And if they were told everything was approved? Rebecca picked up the demolition notice. Then I want to know who told them. Rebecca did not call Patricia. She called the county first. By noon, Susan Hale had confirmed what Daniel already suspected. No demolition permit had been issued for his property. No emergency condemnation order existed. No boundary amendment. Place the parcel inside Briarwood Shores. Rebecca wrote down each answer, thanked Susan, and ended the call. Daniel sat across from her in the workshop. So they had nothing. They had paperwork, Rebecca said. That is not the same thing. Her next call went to the engineering firm named on Patricia's structural assessment. The receptionist transferred her twice before a project manager came on the line. Rebecca gave him Daniel's address and the inspection date. There was a pause while he searched. We have no project at that address, he said. Did anyone from your firm inspect a lake house there at 9:35 that morning? Not according to our records. Is that your company name on the document? Another pause. Yes, but I cannot tell you where that form came from. Rebecca asked him to preserve the firm's records and send written confirmation that no inspection had been performed. When she hung up, Daniel was staring at Patricia's notice. She put their name on it. Maybe she did. Maybe somebody in management did. We prove who before we say who. You ever get tired of saying that? No. Rebecca then called Keysight Services. Thomas Keene answered himself. At first, he was guarded. My crew was told the property was cleared for work. By whom? Rebecca asked. Briarwood Shores Management. Did you verify ownership? We received an authorization packet. I would like a copy. I am not sending company records to a lawyer who does not represent me. Fair enough. Then you should know the Homeowners Association is now describing the demolition as something your crew may have done beyond its instructions. Silence. They said what? Rebecca glanced at Daniel. I suggest you speak with your attorney and preserve the original work order, site plans, permits you were provided, electronic mail, and messages. Especially anything showing who authorized the job. Thomas's tone changed. Nobody from my company designed that job. We were given a site package that looked complete, including the corridor to the lake. Another silence. How do you know about that? Because my client owns it. Thomas ended the call soon afterward, but not before. Promising to speak with counsel. Daniel leaned back. He knows. He knows he may be the person Patricia plans to blame. Rebecca gathered the documents. That usually improves people's memory. That afternoon, she filed Daniel's civil complaint and requested immediate temporary protection preventing Briarwood Shores, its management company, or its contractors from entering the property again. Once the case was active, she sent formal preservation notices and began seeking the records behind the demolition. Patricia responded before the day was over. Her message was short. The association had acted in good faith based on an urgent safety concern, and Daniel was turning an unfortunate situation into unnecessary litigation. Rebecca read it aloud. Daniel looked through the workshop window at the empty foundation. Good faith. Do not answer. I was not going to. Your face was answering. 2 days later, Thomas Keene's attorney sent over the first set of records voluntarily rather than wait for a fight over them. The authorization packet contained a work order, a site map, an association approval letter, and copies of documents presented to Keene Site Services as proof that the work had been cleared. On the surface, the packet looked official enough to explain why a contractor might believe the association had authority. Underneath, the dates caused problems. The work order had been created 9 days before Daniel left for Tennessee. The site map did not show only the house. A yellow strip 40 feet wide ran from the edge of Briarwood Shores across Daniel's parcel to the lake. Daniel tapped it. That is what they cleared. Rebecca nodded. And this was scheduled before your trip. She turned to the next page. The instructions described the work as structure removal and waterfront access preparation. There was nothing about an emergency. Daniel looked at her. So, when did the emergency appear? Rebecca pulled Patricia's notice from the folder. After they already had the job scheduled. The following morning, another envelope arrived. This one came from Elaine Porter. She had not called Daniel or Rebecca. She had simply mailed copies of several board communications she had kept for her own records. One message was from Patricia, sent 11 days before Daniel's trip. The Mercer parcel remains the final obstacle to waterfront access. We need the site cleared before the developer's next review. Daniel read it once, then handed it back. There it is. Rebecca shook her head. There is motive. That is not the same as the whole case. Beneath the messages was part of a presentation labeled Briarwood Waterfront Expansion. A proposed marina extended into Lake Briarwood. A service route ran inland from the docks and crossed Daniel's property almost exactly where the demolished house had stood. Rebecca placed Robert Mercer's old survey beside the map. The narrow shoreline notation lined up with the proposed route. Daniel stared at both pages. My father knew somebody would want this someday. Maybe. He told me never to sign away the shoreline rights. Rebecca looked at the marina plan again. Then we find out exactly what those rights are. Her phone rang before Daniel could answer. It was Elaine. Her voice was low. I cannot talk long. Rebecca put the call on speaker. Are you safe to talk now? For a minute. Elaine hesitated. Patricia told us the access issue had been resolved months ago. Daniel looked at Rebecca. Rebecca asked, resolved how? She never said. Every time I asked for the agreement, she said council had handled it. Did the board ever see an agreement signed by Daniel Mercer? No. Elaine paused. There is something else. North Star is coming to inspect the waterfront. When? Rebecca asked. For days after the house came down. The workshop went quiet. Rebecca looked at the contractor schedule, then at the marina map. Elaine, I need you to preserve everything you have. I already did. The line disconnected. Daniel looked toward the lake. For days. Rebecca closed the folder. Now we know why they were in a hurry. We still need to know what Patricia promised them. North Star Lake Development did not wait 4 days. By the next afternoon, its attorney had contacted Rebecca. Patricia had apparently told North Star that Daniel was challenging a routine association project after the fact. Rebecca gave him one answer. Daniel challenged their authority months before anyone touched the house. I have the certified letters. There was a pause. Our client was told the access rights were secured. Then your client and mine have something in common. They were both told things that were not true. North Star's attorney would not discuss the development agreement, but he agreed to preserve every document involving Daniel's parcel. More importantly, North Star postponed the site review. When Patricia learned that, she called Daniel directly. He let it ring twice before remembering Rebecca's instructions and handed her the phone. Do not answer it. I was not going to. You were absolutely going to. Patricia left a voicemail. Her voice was controlled, but the friendly tone was gone. Daniel, North Star has suspended its review because of claims being made on your behalf. This project affects more than you. I suggest we resolve this before the community suffers unnecessary losses. Daniel replayed it once. She demolished my house and wants me to worry about her project. Rebecca saved the voicemail. No. She wants you to feel responsible for what happens next. Formal discovery began after the court entered an order preserving the property and the relevant records. Briarwood Shores produced documents slowly. Some arrived twice. Others were missing attachments. Rebecca expected that. What she did not expect was a development agreement more than 100 pages long buried inside a larger production of financial reports and planning materials. Daniel found the important section late that evening. Rebecca. She looked up from the opposite end of the conference table. What? I think this is it. Northstar's agreement required Briarwood Shores to provide guaranteed pedestrian, service, and emergency access between the community and the proposed marina. Daniel read the paragraph again. They cannot build it without a route. Rebecca took the document. They might be able to redesign, but not the project Patricia sold them. A certification appeared several pages later. Patricia had signed it on behalf of Briarwood Shores, stating that the association controlled or would control before construction the property rights necessary for the planned access. Daniel checked the date. This was after I gave her the county plat. Yes. After I told her I was not selling. Yes. So she knew. Rebecca shook her head. Careful. We know she received your records. We know she signed this afterward. Let her explain what she knew. Daniel smiled faintly. You have been waiting months to say that in court. I hope I never have to say anything in court that the documents can say better. The next morning they went back to Robert Mercer's old shoreline records. Rebecca had obtained the recorded instrument referenced on the survey. It granted a narrow access right across one edge of the parcel, but only for county emergency services and utility maintenance. It could not be converted into private recreational access for Briarwood Shores. It could not serve Northstar's marina. Daniel ran his finger along his father's signature. This is what he meant. About never signing away the shoreline? He must have known developers would come eventually. Rebecca turned the page. Your father gave the county what it needed and kept everything else. The $1,800,000 offer suddenly made sense. Purchasing Daniel's property would have solved Patricia's access problem cleanly. When Daniel refused, the notices started. When the notices failed, the association produced its own survey. When Daniel challenged that, contractors appeared. Rebecca drew the dates on a yellow legal pad. She stopped before the demolition. This is where I need another link. What kind? Something showing the demolition was tied to Northstar, not just Patricia being reckless about a house she wanted gone. Daniel thought about Elaine. She said Patricia told the board the Mercer problem would be resolved. That helps. I want more. They got it from Thomas Keene. His attorney provided a message sent with the work order. The instruction came from Briarwood Shores Management, copying Patricia. Complete structure removal and access clearing before scheduled developer review. Daniel stared at the sentence. Is that enough? Rebecca, lean back. It is getting difficult to call this a misunderstanding. That afternoon, Elaine agreed to meet them at Rebecca's office. She arrived carrying a thin blue folder and looked uncomfortable from the moment she sat down. I voted for the waterfront project, she said. You need to know that. Rebecca nodded. I assumed most of the board did. We thought Patricia had the access agreement. Why? Daniel asked. Elaine looked at him. Because she told us she did. Did you ever ask to see it? I did. Elaine looked down at the folder. Not soon enough. She slid a presentation across the table. It was dated 3 months before the demolition and prepared for Northstar. The marina plan filled most of the page. A red route crossed Daniel's property. Beside it were 4 words. Access control pending acquisition. Daniel read them aloud. Elaine nodded. That was the last version I saw before Patricia told us the problem was resolved. Rebecca compared the date with Patricia's later certification. Did Daniel ever sign anything after this presentation? Not that I saw. Did the board vote to condemn his property? The board cannot condemn property. Exactly. Elaine closed her eyes for a moment. What did she do? Daniel did not answer. Rebecca turned the presentation toward her. That is what we are going to make Patricia explain. Elaine's question stayed in the room after she left. What had Patricia actually done? Rebecca already had enough to show that Briarwood Shores lacked authority over Daniel's property. What she still wanted was the decision-making trail inside the association. 2 days later, that trail began arriving. The court had ordered Briarwood Shores to preserve and produce communications related to the Mercer parcel, the waterfront project, and Northstar. Rebecca's office received hundreds of electronic mail messages, meeting notes, invoices, draft presentations, and text exports. Daniel came in after lunch to help organize them by date. You know, he said, looking at 3 boxes of printed records. I used to think my father kept too much paperwork. Rebecca handed him another folder. Your father would have loved litigation. He would have hated the hourly rate. Around 6 that evening, Daniel found an internal budget sheet showing how much Briarwood Shores had already committed to the waterfront project. Engineering studies, marina design, environmental consulting, marketing, and preliminary site work had consumed a significant amount of association money before Northstar ever reached its final review. Daniel slid the sheet across the table. This is why she could not just tell the board the deal was dead. Rebecca read it. It gives her pressure. Keep looking. 20 minutes later, she found something better. It was an electronic mail message from Elaine to Patricia, sent 5 weeks before Daniel's Tennessee trip. Elaine had asked a simple question. Do we have Mr. Mercer's signed access agreement? Patricia replied less than an hour later. Legal access will be resolved before Northstar's site review. No action is required from the board at this time. Daniel read it twice. That is not an answer. Exactly. Another message followed 3 days later. Patricia asked the management office for a demolition estimate on what she called the obsolete lake structure adjacent to the proposed access route. Daniel looked at Rebecca. 5 weeks before the emergency. Rebecca added it to the timeline. Now we have her discussing removal before anyone claims the house was unsafe. The next file came from Patricia's office calendar. A meeting titled Mercer Resolution appeared on the same afternoon as the demolition estimate. Attendees included Patricia, the association manager, and a planning consultant working on the Northstar project. There were no minutes. Rebecca requested the consultant's records. Patricia's attorney objected, calling the meeting unrelated planning work. Rebecca filed a motion asking the court to compel production. While that dispute moved forward, another piece arrived from the engineering firm whose name appeared on the supposed structural assessment. The company provided a signed statement confirming it had never inspected Daniel's house, never declared it unsafe, and never authorized Briarwood Shores to use its name as evidence of an emergency determination. Daniel put the statement beside Patricia's notice. So this document is worthless. As an inspection, yes. Then who made it? That is the next question. The answer came from the electronic version of the file. Metadata showed the notice had been created on a computer assigned to the Briarwood Shores president's office. More importantly, the creation date was 2 days before Daniel left for Tennessee. Rebecca stared at the screen. Read me the first sentence of the notice. Daniel picked up the paper. Following an emergency structural assessment conducted during the owner's absence. He stopped. I was not absent when they created it. No. And the assessment had not happened. No. Daniel sat back. That is bad. Rebecca gave him a tired smile. That is a legal term I must have missed in school. The pressure reached Briarwood Shores almost immediately. Northstar formally suspended further work and demanded documentation proving the association could deliver the access Patricia had promised. Homeowners began asking where their money had gone. Several board members requested an independent review. Patricia responded with a letter to residents saying the waterfront project had been delayed by an outside property dispute and that the association remained confident in its position. Daniel read the letter at his kitchen table in the workshop. Outside property dispute. Rebecca was on speakerphone. Do not answer it. I know. I am serious. Rebecca, I have learned. That would make one of us. 3 days later, Patricia changed tactics. Her attorney sent a letter suggesting Keene Site Services had exceeded the scope of its instructions. Thomas Keene's attorney replied the same afternoon. Attached was the signed authorization packet and a message from Patricia herself confirming that both the structure and the marked access route were to be cleared before Northstar's review. Thomas then agreed to give sworn testimony. I asked whether the permits were handled, he told Rebecca. Management sent us documents that appeared valid and said the association had full authority. We would not have gone onto that property otherwise. Did anyone tell you Daniel disputed ownership or association jurisdiction? No. Did Patricia visit the site before work began? Yes. Did she tell you to stop? Thomas almost laughed. She was there to make sure we finished. After the interview, Daniel and Rebecca sat quietly for a moment. Then Rebecca moved one final message into the center of the table. It had been recovered from Patricia's board account and sent shortly after Daniel mentioned his travel dates. The timing gives us our window. Daniel looked at it, then at the growing timeline covering Rebecca's conference table. She knew I would be gone. That is what the message suggests. And the emergency notice was already written. Yes. And the contractor was already scheduled. Yes. Daniel nodded slowly. So what is left? Rebecca closed the folder. Her explanation. You think she has one? Rebecca looked at the hearing date on her calendar. She is going to need several. Patricia came to the special board meeting with an attorney sitting beside her and a prepared statement in front of her. More than 80 Briarwood Shores homeowners filled the room. Daniel sat in the back with Rebecca. He had no statement and no intention of making one unless somebody asked him a direct question. Patricia opened by calling the demolition an unfortunate result of incomplete information. The board acted on the records available at the time, she said. Elaine Porter leaned toward her microphone. Which records? Patricia looked at her. The safety documentation and the property information provided to management. I have asked for that property information 3 times. Patricia's attorney whispered something to her. There are issues currently in litigation that I cannot discuss, Patricia said. A man in the second row raised his hand. Can you discuss why we spend association money planning a marina without owning the access to it? The room stirred. Patricia waited for the board secretary to restore order. The access issue was represented to the board as resolvable. Elaine stared at her. Represented by who? Patricia did not answer. Another board member, Michael Grant, opened a folder. I have the North Star presentation from 3 months before the demolition. It says access control pending acquisition. When did we acquire it? We did not, Elaine said. Patricia turned toward her. That is an oversimplification. Did Daniel Mercer sign an access agreement? Not to my knowledge. Did he sell us the parcel? No. Then what exactly was resolved? Patricia's attorney leaned toward his microphone. My client is not going to litigate the underlying property dispute in an association meeting. Daniel heard Rebecca whisper beside him. That is the first sensible thing anyone at that table has said. He almost smiled. Patricia moved quickly to another subject, blaming Keen-Site Services for performing work beyond what she described as necessary site preparation. That lasted less than 10 minutes. Michael had a copy of the contractor packet. This says structure removal and waterfront access preparation. Patricia looked at the page. Contractors use their own terminology. Your approval is on the next page. Silence spread across the room. Patricia's attorney asked for a recess. The board refused. Then Elaine produced the message she had preserved after Daniel announced his Tennessee trip. Did you write this? Patricia read it without touching the paper. I write hundreds of messages. Elaine read the sentence aloud. The timing gives us our window. Patricia shifted in her chair. That could refer to any number of scheduling issues. It was sent in a thread titled Mercer Access. Patricia's attorney objected again, but the homeowners were no longer listening to him. They were looking at Patricia. Daniel had spent months imagining what he might say if he ever got the chance to confront her in front of the community. Now that the moment had arrived, he realized he did not need to say much. The documents were doing it for him. A homeowner near the front turned around and spotted him. Mr. Mercer, did the association ever have permission to demolish your house? Rebecca glanced at Daniel, but did not stop him from answering. He stood. No. Did you ever agree to give Briarwood Shores access to the lake across your property? No. Patricia spoke before the next question. Mr. Mercer repeatedly refused to cooperate with reasonable community planning. Daniel looked at her. You offered to buy my property. I said no. That is not the entire history. Then tell them the part where I said yes. Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel sat down. Rebecca leaned toward him. That was enough. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to remove Patricia from control of the waterfront project pending the outcome of an independent review. She remained association president for the moment, but the authority she had used to drive the project was gone. 2 days later, North Star terminated its active planning schedule and demanded reimbursement of certain project costs if Briarwood Shores could not prove the access rights Patricia had certified. Then the association's insurance carrier requested the entire claim file. That created another problem. The insurer wanted to know when Patricia first learned Daniel disputed HOA authority. Rebecca supplied copies of Daniel's certified letters. The earliest had been sent months before the demolition. Patricia could no longer describe the dispute as something discovered afterward. Her attorney contacted Rebecca that Friday. My client is willing to discuss resolution. Rebecca put the call on speaker so Daniel could hear. What kind of resolution? A confidential settlement. Rebuilding costs, temporary housing, reasonable legal expenses. Daniel looked at Rebecca and shook his head. Rebecca said, You are describing an accident. I am describing a way to avoid unnecessary expense for everyone. Your client scheduled the contractor before the claimed emergency, used an inspection that never occurred, and cleared a route identified in a private development agreement. We are not discussing this as a construction mistake. The attorney was quiet. What does Mr. Mercer want? Rebecca looked at Daniel. He answered for himself. My property restored. My rights confirmed. And the truth on the record. The settlement discussion ended soon afterward. Patricia's legal position weakened again when the court ordered production of records from the Mercer resolution meeting. The North Star planning consultant had kept handwritten notes. One line was underlined twice. Acquisition unlikely before review. Alternate control strategy required. Rebecca read it, then slid the page to Daniel. Alternate control strategy, he said. That is one way to describe it. Do we know what it means? Not by itself. She placed the note beside the demolition estimate requested that same afternoon. But juries and judges are allowed to look at what happened next. Daniel stared at the two documents. For months, every piece of the story had lived somewhere different. A contractor's file, a county office, Elaine's folder, North Star's agreement, Patricia's computer, Daniel's cameras. Now Rebecca had them arranged by date in one trial binder. Patricia had offered several explanations. The timeline needed only one. The hearing was set for Monday morning. Monday morning, Patricia Caldwell entered the courtroom with 2 attorneys and 3 boxes of documents. Daniel arrived with Rebecca Sloan and 1 trial binder. That is all we brought, Daniel asked as they sat down. Rebecca placed the binder on the table. We are not being paid by the pound. Across the aisle, Patricia avoided looking at him. The hearing began with the simplest question in the entire case. Who owned the property? Rebecca handed the court Daniel's certified deed, the recorded county plat, and the shoreline instrument signed by Robert Mercer decades earlier. Briarwood Shores had never owned Daniel's parcel. Daniel had never joined the association. The narrow access right along the property was limited to county emergency services and utility maintenance. It gave Briarwood Shores no route to a private marina. Patricia's attorney tried to shift the focus. The association was responding to what it believed was a dangerous structure. Rebecca stood. Then we should look at when they first decided it was dangerous. She called the project manager from the engineering firm named on the emergency notice. Did your company inspect Mr. Mercer's house? No. Did you declare it unsafe? No. Did you authorize Briarwood Shores to say you had? No. Rebecca thanked him and sat down. The next document appeared on the courtroom monitor. It was the electronic record for Patricia's emergency notice. Rebecca asked Daniel to read the creation date. He did. 2 days before he left for Tennessee. When did the notice say the emergency inspection occurred? Rebecca asked. While I was away. So you were still home when this document was created? Yes. Patricia whispered to her attorney. He stood and argued that a draft document did not prove improper intent. Rebecca nodded. I agree. Daniel glanced at her. Rebecca continued. That is why we have the contractor records. Thomas Keene took the stand next. He explained that his company had received an authorization packet that appeared official, including site plans and representations from Briarwood Shores management that the necessary approvals had been obtained. Would you have entered Mr. Mercer's property if you knew he disputed the association's authority? Rebecca asked. No. When was the work scheduled? 9 days before he left for Tennessee. What were you hired to do? Thomas looked toward Patricia before answering. Remove the structure and clear the marked waterfront access route. The work order appeared on the monitor. Then came the message copied to Patricia. Complete structure removal and access clearing before scheduled developer review. Patricia's attorney stood again. The association did not direct the manner in which Keene Site Services performed its work. Rebecca looked at the judge. Then the video should help. Daniel felt the room change before the first clip even played. At 7:46, Patricia's white sport utility vehicle entered the driveway. She stepped out carrying plans and walked directly to the contractor. Rebecca let the footage run. At 9:17, work had already begun. At 9:35, the time of the supposed emergency assessment, no inspector arrived. At 9:42, Patricia unfolded the plans and pointed from the house toward the shoreline. Rebecca stopped the video. Ms. Caldwell, were you present? Patricia had been called to testify earlier and now sat rigidly beside her attorney. Yes. Did you tell the crew to stop? No. Why not? Because I believe the work was authorized. By whom? Patricia hesitated. By the association. Rebecca picked up Daniel's certified letter. You received this 3 months earlier? I received many communications from Mr. Mercer. This one says his property is outside Briarwood Shores and includes the county plat. I would have relied on management and counsel. Please identify the legal opinion telling you the association could demolish his house. Patricia's attorney objected. The judge directed Rebecca to move on. She did. North Star's agreement came next. It required Briarwood Shores to provide access to the marina. Then Rebecca showed Patricia's earlier presentation. A red line crossed Daniel's property beside 4 words. Access control pending acquisition. What did pending acquisition mean? Rebecca asked. Patricia shifted in her seat. That negotiations were ongoing. Did Mr. Mercer sell? No. Did he grant access? No. Yet 3 months later, you certified the necessary property rights would be controlled before construction. Patricia looked toward her attorney. That was based on the project's expected resolution. What resolution? Silence. Rebecca did not fill it. She placed Elaine's preserved message on the screen. The timing gives us our window. Then came the demolition estimate, the contractor schedule, and the notes from the Mercer resolution meeting. Acquisition unlikely before review. Alternate control strategy required. The judge looked over his glasses. Ms. Caldwell, what was the alternate strategy? Patricia answered quietly. I do not recall that phrase being used. Rebecca placed the consultant's original notes on the evidence table. Fortunately, someone did. The damages phase lasted into the afternoon. A licensed appraiser addressed the lakefront property's value before and after the unauthorized work. A construction expert documented the cost of rebuilding the house and restoring the disturbed shoreline. Rebecca presented loss of use, professional expenses, property damage, and the additional damages sought for the intentional course of conduct established by the record. The court did not treat the case as one expensive mistake. The judge returned repeatedly to the warnings Patricia had received before the demolition and the documents created before Daniel ever left town. When he finally read the judgment, Daniel did not react at first. The combined award, including compensatory amounts, restoration costs, recoverable fees, and damages tied to the proven intentional conduct, totaled $14 million. Patricia turned to her attorney. $14 million, she whispered. Her attorney did not answer. Daniel looked at Rebecca. Is that what I think it is? She closed the binder. Yes. But the money was only part of the order. The court also confirmed that Briarwood Shores had no ownership claim over Daniel's parcel and no private marina access across it. The association was barred from entering or using the property without lawful permission. Outside the courthouse, Daniel stood with Rebecca while people passed them on the steps. You know what my father would say? He asked. What? Daniel held up the certified order. Put it in the fireproof box. Rebecca smiled. For once, I agree with a Mercer legal strategy. By early spring, the first thing Daniel rebuilt was not the house. It was the property line. A licensed survey crew spent 2 days marking every corner of the parcel, and Rebecca made sure the updated survey was recorded with the county. Daniel stood near the eastern boundary while the surveyor drove the final marker into the ground. Anything exciting? Daniel asked. The surveyor checked his equipment. Depends what you call exciting. Tell me my land is still where I left it. Exactly where the county says it is. Good enough for me. Only then did construction begin. Daniel had received several offers to sell after the court ruling, including one that would have allowed him to walk away with more money than he had ever expected from the property. He declined all of them. Rebecca asked him about it once over coffee. You could buy another place on this lake. I could. Probably one with fewer legal exhibits attached to it. Daniel smiled. It would not be this place. The new house followed much of his father's original footprint, although Daniel made it more practical. The utilities were relocated. The windows facing Lake Briarwood were widened, and the drainage around the foundation was improved. During cleanup, the builder found a pile of stone from the old fireplace that could still be used. Daniel ran his hand over one of the pieces. Save these. The builder looked at the mismatched edges. They will not look new. That is the idea. Across the ridge, Briarwood Shores was rebuilding something of its own. Patricia Caldwell resigned as association president before the next annual meeting. North Star Lake Development formally withdrew from the marina project after Briarwood Shores failed to deliver the access rights required under its agreement. The glossy waterfront presentations disappeared. So did the promises of private marina access. Elaine Porter stayed on the board, although she nearly resigned herself. One afternoon, she stopped by Daniel's property while the framing crew was working. "I owe you an apology," she said. Daniel set down the tape measure he was holding. "For what?" "I voted for the project. You did not vote to tear down my house." "I voted for Patricia because I believed her when she said the legal work was handled." Daniel looked toward the ridge. "You asked questions when it mattered." Elaine shook her head. "I should have asked sooner." "Probably." She looked surprised by the answer. Daniel shrugged. "You came here for honesty." Elaine laughed. "Fair enough." Under the new board, Briarwood Shores required independent legal review before claiming authority over property outside its recorded boundaries. Large development commitments also required residents to receive clearer financial disclosures before association money could be spent. Daniel had no interest in joining the board, advising it, or attending meetings unless his property was directly involved. "You could make them nervous just by sitting in the back row," Rebecca told him. "I have better hobbies." "You did spend 6 months organizing evidence." "That was not a hobby. You color-coded it. That was your idea." By May, the exterior of the house was finished. The 40-foot strip cleared toward the lake had been restored and replanted. There was no marina, no community path, no association sign. Just Daniel's yard running down to the shoreline the way it had before Patricia decided a development map mattered more than a deed. The final county inspection came on a cool Thursday morning. After the inspector signed off, Daniel walked through the house alone. The room still smelled like fresh wood and paint. Then he stopped at the fireplace. The salvaged stones were easy to spot among the new ones. Some were darker. A few carried small marks from years of use. Daniel stood there longer than he expected. His father had laid those stones nearly 40 years earlier. They had survived even when the rest of the house had not. Later that afternoon, the builder handed Daniel a small cardboard box. "Found these when we were sorting the last debris." Inside were the original brass house numbers. They were scratched and dirty, but intact. Daniel cleaned them at the kitchen sink and mounted them beside the front door himself. That evening, he carried Robert Mercer's old fireproof document box to the kitchen table. The original deed went inside first, then the shoreline agreement, then the certified county survey. Finally, Daniel added the court order confirming that Briarwood Shores had no ownership or private access rights across his property. He closed the lid and heard his father's voice in his memory telling him never to sign away the shoreline. For most of his life, Daniel had thought Robert was simply stubborn. Now he understood. The next morning, Daniel took his coffee down to the dock before sunrise. Lake Briarwood was almost perfectly still. Behind him, the rebuilt house reflected across the water. Across the ridge, Briarwood Shores was quiet. Rebecca had asked him once whether the $14 million judgment made the whole fight feel worth it. Daniel told her it was the wrong question. He would rather have come home from Tennessee and found his father's house exactly where he left it. The money could rebuild walls. It could restore the land. It could pay lawyers and experts an account for what had been taken from him. It could not give him back the original house. But Patricia had been wrong about something much more basic. She thought that once the building disappeared, Daniel's claim would become weaker. Instead, every step taken to remove it had left a record behind. Daniel took another sip of coffee and looked toward the shoreline. The house was back. The marina was gone. And the land had never stopped being his.